Blackmore.
Wrestling. You're gonna find this on every cornerstone across the world, and fighting games are no different. But what makes it so popular within the world of fighting games, especially with our grappler style characters that we have as an archetype? Wrestling is one of the most coolest things out there, and especially the most story-driven things out there that you can really find in media. So there was no way I was not going to cover this, but I hope you enjoy what I have in store for today's video, because we're going to be going over 18 different styles of wrestling out there, along with different characters that have these certain archetypes with them on these real life wrestling styles. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. But anyways, let's dive in. Catch wrestling, or catch-as catch-can wrestling, was created in 1870 by British wrestler J.G. Chambers, a Welsh sportsman who was responsible for instituting championships for several sports in the UK. The origins of catch wrestling came from English wrestlers who performed at fairs throughout the region. They would also develop their own submission holds that they would call hooks. Catch-as catch-can was actually the original style of wrestling introduced into the Olympics in 1904, but the rules were altered to no submissions allowed, which created freestyle wrestling. This style of wrestling would also influence the creation of Sambo and Lucha Libre. Today, catch wrestling is still widely practiced and has many effective techniques, including its leg lock system. Former UFC World Champion Josh Barnett is also a catch wrestling specialist and one of the style's biggest ambassadors out there. Some characters that fall into this category is King from the Taken series. Despite his professional wrestling background, he really leans towards the catch wrestling aspect and is one of the most decorated 3D catch wrestlers out there for traditional fighting games, even being based off the legendary Japanese pro wrestler Satoru Sayama, aka Tiger Mask, along with King the First's original background story being based on the luchador wrestler Fray Tormenta, who worked at an orphanage as a priest as well. Another great catch wrestler addition would have to go to Big Bear, aka Raiden from Fatal Fury and King of Fighters, who was inspired by the late great Big Van Vader, hell of a big man wrestler that can still be a high flyer at times. Now, shoot style wrestling was born out of a desire to bring realism back into professional wrestling. The roots of this style can be traced to Japan's UWF, where wrestlers wanted to showcase techniques closer to actual combat sports, emphasizing strikes, submissions, and heavy storytelling grounded in reality. Unlike traditional pro wrestling, shoot style emphasizes heavy striking, like hard-hitting kicks and punches inspired by martial arts. Submission moves like arm bars, leg locks, and chokes borrowed from disciplines such as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and catch wrestling. Instead of flashy aerial moves, the focus remains on grounded, realistic exchanges. You'll see flashy acrobatics rarely, since it's not the main focus to rely on. So many matches unfold like chess games, where each move and counter move building tension. So building off of that with storytelling is one of the biggest things you'll see strongly represented. Armor King from the Taken series is such a strong representative of shoot wrestling, with its brutal strikes, chops, toe kicks, headbutts, chokeholds, and many other attacks compared to his counterpart King's catch wrestling style. Both of these characters do have professional wrestling in their styles like I mentioned before, but have their own respective styles that they heavily lean more towards something else. Wolf from Virtual Fighter is a pretty hybrid style wrestler himself, but with the heavy King Road style influence of All Japan Pro Wrestling style,
with the dash of shoot style into the mix. It helps that his inspiration comes from the Orange Crush himself, Kenta Kobashi, from the chops and the infamous Burning Hammer drop. One of the biggest 2D female wrestlers out there that has a shoot style approach, I'd say Rainbow Mika. She's heavily portrayed as a pro wrestler like Zangief, but inspired by Japanese women's pro wrestling, along with her inspirations coming from the manga Lucha Libre. I recommend giving that a read if you're a big fan of older sports style mangas out there. Street Fighter 3's old protagonist, Alex, is another character you can put into the shoot style category. I was hesitant at first trying to decide whether he leaned more towards just pro wrestling, but he uses quite a bit of strikes due to his kickboxing background on top of his big man wrestling style. Honorable mention, I'll throw in Jason G from Capcom's Beatdown Twisted Vengeance. Ever able to snag a copy? Give it a try. He has so many hard-hitting strikes and throws. Hell, even he has the spinning lariat as a move in his arsenal. Now, we can't talk about Lucha Libre without giving flowers to the almighty Salvador Laudereth Gonzalez, the father of Lucha Libre itself. A professional wrestling promoter of Empresa Mexicana de Lucha Libre, which was founded in 1933, birthing so many different legendary luchadors like El Santo, Fishman, and many others. Lucha Libre became such a cultural phenomenon in Mexico. Legends like El Santo transcended wrestling to become a movie star and national hero. The mask, once just a costume, became a symbol of pride, identity, and resistance. What makes this so unique is for its emphasis on agility, speed, and aerial maneuvers. Unlike the brute force and technical grappling seen in American or Japanese wrestling, it's a ballet of flips, counters, and gravity-defying stunts. So you'll be seeing high-flying maneuvers like hurricanranas and placas, just to name some examples. In Lucha Libre, it's about creating a spectacle. Every match is a story, and every move is a page in that story is the best way I can paint a picture for it all. To remove your mask is a sign of retirement and disrespect if you lose a match or are forced to remove it. Some obvious examples I can say wrestlers like Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero brought its high-flying style to global promotions like WWE, influencing generations of performers. Lucha Libre's crazy unique style also leaped into the world of video games, especially fighting games. Characters inspired by luchadors range across so many different franchises. Their moves, masks, and theatrics pay so much homage to this unique art form. Characters like King and Armor King that I've mentioned before also pays homage to luchadors. Even Tekken Tag 2's surprising spin with JC, despite it being just Julia with some of her moves, has a plethora of new additional moves from the Hurricanranas and many more. This was the first time Tekken has had any pure female luchador representative, and hopefully we see an official return to this character being the actual JC, picking up the mask for another go at it. Dead or Alive didn't get their luchador roughly until later in the series with La Mariposa, being another wonderful addition to represent the Lucha Libre style that has remained a mainstay character since their debut in the Extreme Volleyball games back on the original Xbox, and DOA 4 for her very first fighting game appearance. El Blaze is another awesome addition to the 3D fighting game luchador space, whose design reminds me strongly of Rey Mysterio, so I wouldn't be surprised if that was the inspiration behind him from the Virtual Fighter team. Some more mentions from Street Fighter 4's newcomer El Fuerte, SNK's representation with Tizak and Ramon, so it is always amazing to see the many different characters still showing love to Lucha Libre, which I'm sure there's more characters out there that I'm just not thinking of. So feel free to let me know in the comments. When people talk about wrestling in general, you're most likely going to be seeing them referring to freestyle wrestling. It is one of the most practiced wrestling styles in the world and super easy to get into. And what's super interesting about freestyle wrestling is it comes off of catch wrestling, like I mentioned before, making its debut in the 1904 Olympics with similar rules to catch wrestling, but submissions were excluded from the competition. In a freestyle match, takedowns attacking the legs and upper body are allowed, which adds an extra layer from Greco-Roman wrestling, where takedowns are only allowed from the waist up. Later on, after the 1904 Olympics, universities in the US began creating wrestling teams, and later in grade schools, wrestling quickly became one of the most popular sports not only in the US but the world. So there are now numerous countries around the world with elite freestyle wrestlers, especially schools and programs out there. One of the best 2D representations I'd say for freestyle wrestling on top of their professional wrestling background is Zangief from Street Fighter. I mean, he is after all based off of Victor Zangief. He's the cultural backbone behind Zangief's creation, a retired Russian freestyle wrestler from the Soviet that wrestled professionally in Japan for quite a while. And I mean, he was an eye catcher with his incredible display of moves. Another character that can be added to the freestyle wrestler conversation, I'd say, is Fighting EX Layers Darun Mista. Even everyone's favorite wrestling mayor like Mike Haggard falls into this category. Professional wrestling is designed primarily as entertainment rather than a competitive sport. The matches are scripted with predetermined outcomes and choreographed moves to create a dramatic and engaging spectacle. Think of promotions like WWE, AEW, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Storylines, rivalries, and characters play a significant role, blending elements of theater, drama, and athleticism, especially having heroes which are faces and villains which are heels. Professional wrestling often uses exaggerated moves and high-flying stunts that prioritizes visual appeal over competitive practicality. While many techniques are based on real wrestling or martial arts, they are modified to ensure safety and a dramatic effect. While professional wrestlers are highly trained athletes, their primary goal is to entertain rather than to compete in a strict sporting sense. The focus is on storytelling through physical performances rather than simply achieving victory. This combination of athleticism, drama, and storytelling sets professional wrestling apart from other wrestling styles, which are typically more focused on competition and technical skill. Now, a majority of these characters fall under the pro wrestling tagline in traditional fighting games, but what makes many of these characters unique to me is that they're not defined by that one single aspect alone, and have other focuses of wrestling styles that dominate more. Characters like Angel from King of Fighters may have a Muay Thai background, but also a professional wrestling in her arsenal, in which she's an actual Mexican wrestler in her respective storyline. I mean, come on, she has the rock bottom and the people's elbow for her supers. Dead or Alive's Boss and Tina Armstrong fill the void of that professional wrestling archetype that they wear on their sleeves, especially Boss's Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage influence oozing in his design along with the big man technical wrestling style approach. Sumo is one of the wrestling styles that's been part of Japan's culture going on 1,000 years. Legends say that the demigods decided ownership of the Japanese islands in a sumo match, originating from a ritual dance ancient Japanese farmers would do to ask for rain from the gods. A sumo match is held in a dirt ring called a donyo, and the wrestlers are referred to as rikishis. The uniform normally consists of a loincloth called a mawashi. Mawashis made of silk are designed for high-ranking rikishis and black cotton for lower pro rikishis. So anytime before a match starts, you'll see wrestlers dance around the ring and throw salt on the ground to bless the donyo as tradition. To win a match, a rikishi must either take their opponent to the ground, They can also win by pushing their opponent out of the dojo. Characters ranging from Street Fighter, King of Fighters, Project Justice, Tekken, and Virtual Fighter have their own sumo representatives out there, from Honda, Hinako, Gan, Ganryu, and Taka carry the absolute spirit of sumo into their games. Hopefully we will see this continue down the line in many different fighting games. To me, this is one of the other unique wrestling styles out there. Even though some people may joke about it within combat sports communities, but Turkish oil wrestling is a pretty legit thing in Turkey. Wrestlers wrestle each other in a field shirtless, but they are doused in oil to make things much harder to take folks down. The logic behind this is to test whoever is the strongest wrestler are able to land their takedowns on people, even despite the handicap covered in oil. The only single fighting game character we've ever been graced to use this style is Street Fighter 4's Hakan, especially covering himself in oil as a game mechanic, only for him to alter his speed, moves, and many other properties. Will we ever get a character like this again? Who knows? Hopefully we do soon. Mongolian Wrestling, aka Bukh, is a wrestling style that dates back thousands of years. One of the coolest styles out there I've come across so far. There is a cave painting in central Mongolia that dates all the way back to 7000 BC, showing just early versions of the style. Now, the style has been ingrained into the culture of Mongolian people. Thousands attend traditional Mongolian events as well. Wrestlers wear the traditional Bukh wrestling attire that consists of colorful half shirts, speedos, and black boots. Matches are held in a dirt circle, where the competitors start from standing. Think of it like a mixture of Greco-Roman, Sumo, and Judo. You lose the match if any part of your body other than your foot is touching the ground. There's even a similar style called Tuvan Wrestling all the way in Siberia. I would love to see a character using this style make its way into a fighting game one day. Just imagine after losing a game, seeing the victory screen of the character doing the eagle dance on you. One man can dream. Folk style wrestling, there's not too much I can tell you what I already like giving out here and there. But most people know is what you see at universities across the US. It's pretty similar to freestyle wrestling, but has few key differences. Things like the point system and the rules in competitions. There's more points awarded in escapes from the bottom position. Locking hands when attempting takedowns or pins are allowed, but not from riding positions. Ben Askren is an example of one of the best folk wrestlers out there in MMA, and he's a former one champion too with that. So if you ever want to see a perfect example out there of seeing this being molded into the MMA field, check him out. This next style, Kurash, is practiced within Central Asia and Russia. Developed off of the roots of judo and wrestling similar to sambo, but has a different structure to its rules. A towel is worn around competitors' waists instead of the traditional sambo gi tops. Matches are held in wrestling mats in the middle of the field. These wrestlers start the match by grabbing hold of each other's towels and fight for positioning, using the towel grip to make angles and get leverage to land throws or takedowns, which I thought this was a pretty interesting take on it. Coming from the West African country of Senegal, Senegalese wrestling dates far back to the 14th century in the Kingdom of Ssireum. It is ingrained in the tradition of Senegal and is the official sport of the country. If you've seen the Netflix documentary series Fight World, you've definitely seen this style before. A Senegal wrestling match takes place in a dirt circle, similar to folk style wrestling with a few key differences. One of the big differences is that steps are allowed in Senegalese wrestling to set up takedowns. The main goal in a match is to land an overhead takedown or throw an opponent out of the area. I highly recommend you check out the documentary series on Netflix if you have an account. Coming all the way from Switzerland, dating way back to the 17th century. This country has their very own style of wrestling with a new twist of folk style, but with variations to the rules. Schwingen Wrestling comes originally from a competition between farmers and herders gathering together at festivals to see who had the best wrestlers between the two groups. The matches are held in a dirt circle too, where both competitors start with grips on the wrestling britches. Whoever can throw the other competitor to the ground wins the match. Simple as that. Now, Ssireum is a Korean folk style of wrestling and is the national sport of South Korea. So you'll definitely see this everywhere you go around the area. Dating back in the 4th century within Korea, competitors wear wrestling shorts and a belt called a sakba. A sakba is similar to what you see worn in sumo, but goes around the opponent's waist and thighs instead. Matches are held in a dirt circle, which you're going to be seeing quite a bit of these in a dirt circle, where both wrestlers start on their knees and lock hold of the sakbas. In order to win a match, the competitor must make their opponent's body hit the ground from the knees up, which is a pretty interesting way to go about it in this manner. Scottish backhold wrestling has been a pretty old sport in Scotland for so many centuries. Backhold wrestling is basically the ride position with freestyle, Greco-Roman, and folk-style wrestling from what I've mentioned for the many different styles there. One person holds of the other's back in the ride position. They must try to throw their opponent while the other tries to break free of their hold. Most Scottish backhold wrestling matches consist of best-of-5 series between the competitors and is still holding sporting events even in the modern times. Collar and elbow wrestling is a type of Irish jacket wrestling that goes back to the 2nd millennium BC, which is, this wrestling style has been around for ages. Competitors wear a light jacket, shorts, and boots. Wrestlers grab hold of each other's jackets and fight for positions to land takedowns. There are also different versions of collar and elbow in regions such as the UK, with the biggest being Cornish wrestling. The goal in Cornish wrestling is also to throw your opponent and make them land flat on their backs. Collar and elbow is still practiced in Ireland and one of the many events at the annual Untitled Games. Sorry if I butchered that. So luckily many of these wrestling styles aren't lost through time. From the far lands of the Nordic countries, Vikings having one of the most ruthless reputation shows in the wrestling style of Glima. It's a type of modern wrestling practice in Iceland. Now, what sets Glima apart from other wrestling styles is its emphasis on technique and mutual respect. Unlike wrestling forms that focus on brute force, the aim is to throw your opponent off their feet while staying on yours. Glima is divided into 3 primary styles, each with its own purpose behind it. Lasatok Glima, a free grip form focusing on throws and holds, often used in friendly competition. Volkatok Glima, a combat-oriented style which incorporates striking and grappling techniques for real-world situations. Harkspinna Glima, a backhold form where competitors lock arms behind each other's backs, aiming to trip or unbalance their opponent. Despite its origins in life and death combat, modern Glima wrestling has high regard for the technical aspects of the sport rather than simple strength moves. So it's pretty interesting to see even in the Nordic countries that wrestling has expanded even in those lands. Tracing its origins back to ancient India, Pawani, or sometimes called Kushti, it was made from wrestling styles from the mainland India combined with styles from ancient Persia and now modern day Iran. What's pretty cool about this wrestling style, no point system, nothing at all like any other forms. This style of wrestling is famous in India, along with being done in a dirt circle like a few others out there, but with a catch. The aim is to pin your opponent's shoulders and hips to the ground. A win can also be achieved by knockout or submission, along with wrestling in the mud in competitions as well. Last but not least, Cumberland Wrestling is a style that is seen at agricultural shows in the northwest area of England. It is one of the many wrestling styles from the English counties, each of which has its own slight variants. Cumberland Wrestling is similar to the form Glima, This may be due to the Viking influence of the north of England from what I've researched. Now, it starts with a backhold. The wrestlers stand up facing each other with their chests touching. Each contestant wraps their arms around the other and has their chin on their opponent's right shoulder. When a match starts, they try to trip or lift the other. If one loses their grip, they lose the match. If one succeeds in getting the other to the ground, they win. That's the spin on it for this style of wrestling.
So, what do you guys think? The world of wrestling, it's so fascinating, and I feel strongly why we have like such an abundance of grapplers in general just for fighting games, and really just wrestling is like the default out there because it is so heavily ingrained, especially with Japan, especially with New World Japan style wrestling and things like that. You were never going to escape this. And the fact that they love wrestling too, as much as we do over here in the West. So we wouldn't have our lovely characters that we have like Zangief, King, Armor King, Boss, and so many others out there. But I strongly feel that is one of the main core reasons that we just have wrestling and grapplers in general in these fighting games, because we definitely need something to shake up the archetype from your Shotos and your brawler type characters. And grapplers always bring an interesting dynamic perspective and such a mind game behind whenever you are fighting against someone. So to me, it's a beautiful thing that we have these grapplers out here, and especially wrestling in these traditional fighting games. But if you enjoyed today's video, please give a like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you can stay updated on any new videos coming to the channel. And we have a plethora of fighting style variants coming to the channel. Like, I still have a bunch of more stuff planned, and I will probably open another community vote tab as well. So you guys seem to really enjoy whenever I do those, so don't worry, we're gonna keep doing those, and I'm gonna come up with the next 3 that I would love to see what you guys would want to see covered first. But anyways, y'all, it's Blackmore here, signing out. Catch you later, folks. Peace.